Welcome to Property Mama Adventures in Real Estate. This is where I share all about the goings on and shenanigans in the real estate industry over the past almost three decades where I've been buying and selling real estate. If we have not met before, my name is Wendy Chamberlain and I am a buyer's advocate, a buyer's agent and vendor advocate here in Melbourne, Australia. So today I wanted to share about some of the adventures that I've had when I have been purchasing my own properties. One of the things that I love to do, just for fun, you might not think it's fun, is to buy properties, renovate them and flip them and sell them. And one of the properties that we purchased around about 18 years ago now that we purchased was a really old rundown terrace in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. So this particular property was being put on the market because the mum was living in the property. She was in her 90s and she was going to be put into care. And so the daughter, who was in her 60s, was selling the property. And the agent that was appointed to sell the property was what we refer to as an out-of-area agent. Now, when it comes to buying property where the agent is not local, that can sometimes be to your advantage because they don't always know the local market, they don't always know the local area, and so therefore they don't know the local prices. So this can sometimes be to your advantage. So I remember walking into the property. Now, this was, there was a row of terraces. It was on quite a narrow street. It was a one-way street. And this was the property on the end of the row. And it was very, very run down. So it was a prime candidate to be renovated and fixed up and then put back onto the market. So I walked in, have a look at the property, and one of the first things the agent said to me when I said, "Oh, what do you think the value of the home is?" He said, "I'm not from around here. What do you think?" I thought, okay, great. So you don't know the property, you don't know the values. And it was advertised what I considered to be quite low as well. Now, I don't think it was a case of underquoting. I think that that's where this particular agent did not know the market. So this sometimes happens that out-of-area agents are appointed to sell properties, often when they might be a family friend, and given the age of the vendor, that was probably the case here. Sometimes that could just be on their rent roll and they're selling the property because they happen to rent the property. But I think this person was a friend of the family and that's why they were getting appointed, because they weren't one of your larger or locally well-known brands. They were quite a small boutique real estate agency. So the property was set to be auctioned. Now, they weren't prepared to look at any offers, and so we just waited for the auction day. Now, bidding an auction is an art. It can be an art because you need to know what you're doing. And it's quite interesting and curious to me that people think that they're not, this is not what they do. So they're not doing it all the time. But they think that they have the expertise and can turn up and do it. Anyway, so like I said, it was on a narrow street and a one-way street, and it was a row of terrace houses. And so the auctions often, mostly they take place out on the street, unless it's raining, and then you'll sometimes be inside. But mostly it's on the street. There are occasions, some agencies like to basically run auction rooms, and I've been to those as well, and they whip everybody up into a frenzy. It's actually quite interesting. If you've not been to one of those auction nights, I think they call them, where they auction multiple properties in a row. There's certain branded real estate agents that like to do that, and they'll have 10, 15 auctions of properties all on the night. It's like a Tuesday night, Wednesday night type of thing, and they'll hold it at a local hall or a venue where they can get everybody in the room, and there's all these chairs. And let me tell you about that for a moment. So I've been along to those, and the energy in the room becomes electric, and I think that's why they do that is they have one auction after another. So it's like turning up to a show. You've got all the seats there, and then they'll have all the agents roving the room, and they have the slide up there, and they have the auctioneer, and they have the presentation up there, and they'll auction one property after another, and so people come and go in the room, but it becomes this electric atmosphere because they're just constantly pumping people up. So attending an auction anyway can be quite a nerve-wracking experience for people, and now turn that dial up even more, probably like 100%, because you've got all these people, not just one auction's worth of people. You've got 10 plus auctions worth of people all in the one room, coming and going. And then you've got the agents working the room and the auctioneer standing at the front and bidding on these properties. It's quite a scene to take part in. So it's if you're curious and interested in that kind of thing, it is something you should go along and have a look at. So they'll start off auctioning one, and then you've got the agents working the room. The agents of this particular real estate agency brand, they effectively work their buyer. And what I mean by work their buyer is they're trying to get their buyer, the person that they know is interested in the property, first of all to bid, but then to bid as much as possible. Because as I've said on previous episodes, remember, the real estate agent does not work for you, the buyer. The real estate agent is employed by the seller. That's who they're working for. So we deal with lovely people. Real estate agents are lovely people. However, they're doing a job, and their job is to get the best result they can for their client, who is the vendor. As your buyer's agent, we're looking to get the best result and do the best job for you as our buying client. We're there standing shoulder to shoulder with you, side by side, holding your hand, supporting you to buy properties. That's what we do with you. So you'll have these agents roving the room, pushing people. This happens on the street as well. Certain real estate agents have certain brands will have they wheel in an auctioneer. So they have an auctioneer that runs the show at the front of the room or out on the street, and then they'll have the individual real estate agents working their buyer, standing by their buyer. They'll be standing there with their pencil, showing them the bids, so that they can. And the auctioneer calls out the bids, but they'll have someone standing there. And let me tell you, if you're not used to bidding at auction, it can be quite intimidating because you've got someone standing there and they're right in your face. They don't do it to me very often, or if they start to do it, they stop doing it because they get a look from me. It's like, dude, I got it. I know what I'm doing. So they don't kind of stand too close. Plus, I've got my own tactics that I do at auction that even if I have not told them I'm a buyer's agent, they pretty much pick up on it pretty quickly that I am a buyer's agent, because just because of how I behave, how I communicate, how I bid, they can tell that I am a professional at what I do, and they know that I got it. So they tend to back off. If they come and stand really close to me, I'll just smile at them and they kind of just wander away after a little while, which is interesting. So the frenzy in those auction rooms is really interesting because it gets electric because they do it deliberately, and they do one after another. So let's go back to the auction for this little terrace that I was attending. So it was a very narrow street, one-way street. So the auctioneer, as they normally do, was standing at the front of the property and they're looking out at the crowd. One of the things that I like to do is to stand next to the auctioneer or not far from the auctioneer, because you can get the bird's eye view that the auctioneer has. You're seeing what the auctioneer is seeing. And so the bidding started, back and forth, and that's fine. And I was bidding, and there was someone else bidding. Now, so the house basically was behind me. I had the auctioneer to my left, and I was standing there. And so when I was bidding, the auctioneer was turning to face me, and then he'd go back and source and seek bids from the rest of the crowd. Now, on the as I said, it was a one-way street, and then a little further down there was a T intersection. So people were spread out on the street for this auction. So on the other side of the road and a little further down past that T intersection was someone else that was bidding. So a number of bids were happening, and it ended up being myself bidding in competition with this other person on the other side of the street. And it was getting to the pointy end of the auction. And when I say pointy end, that's when things start to slow down. So if you've ever been to an auction, you will know that at the start, things can be going a lot faster, and often the increments of the bid are much larger. So an auctioneer will come out onto the street and they'll call for a start, and oftentimes the start can be in $50,000 or $20,000 rises. It can be more than that, but that generally that's what it will happen. And if there are no bids and the auctioneer opens on a vendor bid, which means they're putting in a bid to get things started on behalf of their vendor, they will often do that. And depending where they start that first bid, they'll then call for a rise of $50,000 or $20,000 on that vendor bid. So as you progress through an auction, the bidding amounts start to get smaller and smaller. That's just not naturally what happens, because as it's rolling along and things are flowing and people are coming into the auction bidding process, they'll have their bids going, and then oftentimes people will hit their limit and then they drop out and they can't bid anymore because they've run out of money. For their budget doesn't cover what that property is going to sell for, and so they stop bidding. And so that the bidding tends to start petering out. The bids amounts get lower and lower, down to 5,000, 2,500, whatever. You can bid any amount you want. You actually can bid any amount you want. People have done that. They bid $100, $1. They can do that. It is up to the auctioneer to choose whether or not they can accept the bid, because under the Victorian laws here, that it is at the agent's discretion as to whether or not they accept a bid. It's why at the start of an auction, you'll often get auctioneers refusing a bid or saying, I'm not accepting those bids at the moment, because people might say, I'll give you 1,000, I'll give you 5,000. And because it's too early in the bidding process, you're not towards the end of the auction or getting closer to where the auctioneer wants you to be, or where the reserve is, or where the vendor might be prepared to sell their property at, they will knock those bids back and say, not taking rises of 5,000 or 2,000 or whatever they're going to say at this point in time. I'll come back to you. And they may well do that, and then they'll go back around the crowd. And then if the auction progresses, they may then come back to that person, or if they get no other bites or interest from anyone else, then they may even consider coming and taking that bid at that point in time. So that's what happens as the auction goes through. So when we're getting to the pointy end, which is the smaller amounts are starting to come through. And that's what started to happen on this particular auction for this property. So it basically came down between me and this other person who was on the other side of the road. So again, positioning, I was on the right of the auctioneer. He was standing on my side of the street next to me with the property behind him. And then you had this other person on the side of the street. So whenever the bids were going back and forth, he had to look at me, and then he had to look over there. So his head was moving like this, which meant that we were getting right to the end. And so he had got a bid out of that person, and then I had bid over the top of that person. So the bid was with me. So if the hammer was going to fall to sell the property, it was going to be sold to me. And then again, if you've gone to an auction, you'll see auctioneers going back around the crowd, checking that everybody is out, that no one else is going to bid. Because if somebody has bid previously, they'll go back to them and check, because somebody might come into the fray and start bidding, and then they reach their budget and then they drop out. And the good auctioneers will go back around and say, are you out, permission to sell, all these kind of things that they've got their scripts to say, because they're checking to make sure that every single buyer is finished. They're not going to bid anymore. And the reason they do that is because oftentimes people will come back in, they'll make another bid, or I was going to say, very upsettingly for buyers is this: they've said no and the auctioneer thinks they're out and then sells it to someone else, and they go, oh, no, hang on a minute, I want to bid again. It's too late. It's too late. You need to make sure that you are actively participating in the auction. None of this foxing and funny business that people, I don't know if they think they're being smart or clever, but you will miss out on a property if you haven't got your strategy straight. And the strategy does not include playing funny buggers and pretending that you're not interested and thinking you're going to come back in later. Because I don't know, what do you think, you're going to get one up or get one better than the auctioneer? Because it doesn't work that way, and people miss out. And this is why auctioneers constantly, over and over, will give multiple calls saying, we're going to be selling it, etc., so that people know they're not mucking around. They're not trying to be funny or difficult, or and it's interesting because people say, oh, I don't like real estate agents. It doesn't matter whether you like a real estate agent or not. If you want to buy a property and it is being sold by a real estate agent has to be dealt with. And that's where we come in. If you don't like real estate agents or don't like dealing with real estate agents, or you're not confident, or they annoy you, or whatever your reasons are, please come to us. We support you, and this is what we do. So let's help you buy a property. Let me help you buy a property. And so, as I said, that other person had made a bid, and then the bid was with me. And this person was shaking their head saying, no, they were out. And the auctioneer saying, so you're out, permission to sell the property. And the head's going this way. It's not going this way. It's going this way, saying we're out. We're not going to bid anymore. And he said, selling. And he turned to me, because that's what they do. They will go and say, sold. And they'll look at the person, the buyer, and say that it's sold. As he turned to me and said, sold, he's facing me. Remember, I said my tactic was to stand next to the auctioneer, so he was facing me. As he sold it to me, the other guy put his hand up. You're too late, mate. You're too late. The property got sold to me because he did not know what he was doing. I knew what I was doing. He did not know what he was doing. So attending and bidding at auctions is an art. I have done it many, many times. So please let me help you bid at auction to buy your dream property. Whatever you're planning to do, it might be your first home, might be your family home. You might be upsizing to something bigger because your family is growing. You might be downsizing to something a little bit more manageable because your family has grown and they've moved away. Whatever it is, you might have someone that is a loved one but that's being moved into care, or who has passed away, and you need to sort out getting their property sold so that you can facilitate their next step or your next step. Whatever it is, we're here to help you in the real estate industry. We're here to help you. So please reach out and get in touch. So we've purchased this property, which is brilliant. And it was a true reno delight. It really, really was a true reno delight. And so when we waited for the settlement to happen, obviously went inside, signed all the paperwork. That was very, very exciting. And it was the daughter that was selling the home on behalf of her mother, who was being moved into care. As it turned out, the mother did pass away through the settlement period. That didn't affect us being able to purchase the property. And so we took possession of the property and we started our renovation. And the funny thing about renovating property is, as any tradie will tell you, nothing is square. Nothing is square. It's why builders and tradies much prefer, in my experience, a brand new build or to build something from scratch, because when you're renovating something, everything has moved and nothing is square. What I mean by that, walls are like this. Is that straight? Walls are straight in when you build them, and over time they do whatever. And so you're there trying to piece together things onto something that is has moved and is bent. The other thing with renovating property is that when people say, well, you've got a budget of X, allow X plus Y, because you do not know what you're going to find. You absolutely never know what you're going to find, and you'll find something. You will always find something. So, and this property was one of the old worker cottages. So it was over 100 years old. So over that time, you can imagine she's seen better years. She's seen a few things. She's seen better days. But I love bringing old houses back to their former glory, to new life. And that's what we were planning to do with this beautiful old home. When we had finished getting things ready before we built it back up, all that we had were the walls, the roof, and the front facade. Everything else got gutted because it was in that bad condition. When we first took possession of the property to have a look at the true state of things, because you can only really get an idea of things. It's more difficult when someone is living there and they've got all their things in there. So you'd walk in, there was the front. It had beautiful polished boards. Well, I would say beautiful timber boards. They weren't polished at that point. Beautiful timber floors, which is what many of the old houses would have, with these gorgeous timber boards. Then over time, they just would get covered up. So in the front corner, there weren't any boards. Now, keep in mind, someone was living in this house. They were living in this house. And there in the front room, in the corner, at least half a metre square, the floorboards were missing. They just didn't exist. They obviously had rotted and been ripped up, and they just weren't replaced. So we had that. There was only one toilet, which was the outhouse. So back in the day, and there was a lane behind the house. Back in the day, there used to be the night watchman that would come, and you'd have all these outhouses on the back lane, and the night watchman would come with his horse and cart, and he would empty all of the outhouses along the lane. And so that had been updated to at least have modern facilities and a modern toilet, but there was no other toilet in the house. It was right at the back outside. There was no kitchen in this house. What was being used was, do you remember, I don't know, if, at school when you did craft, there used to be one of those metal sinks. That's what we had at school. That's what was there. That was the kitchen. It was just a metal sink with a couple of cupboards underneath. And there was this lean-to area at the back. So there was the original property, which was basically the front room and then 2 bedrooms and then this area. And you walk through this sort of like they'd covered, it was a walkway. They'd covered it at some point and they'd put this sink in. That was the kitchen. There was no other kitchen area. And then you'd go outside and there was tacked onto it what you would consider to be, it was a laundry. And in there was a copper. So the old coppers were these big round, literally copper drum things, and you would heat them up and then you would put your washing in there. And that's what this was. That's how this person was doing their washing, was that they would put it and they would do the copper. So the house really needed some TLC. So as we started to renovate, we got to get a bit of a history of the property, because they had, over the years, so it had these floorboards, and then they had put, and often they would do this back in the day as a form of, I don't know if it was insulation or form of carpeting, but they would put newspapers down, then they'd put lino and then the carpet on top of that. Well, that's what was, those were the layers in this house. So at the front of the house, when we pulled up, well, there was just the boards that were missing in one of the corners, but they had carpet. As we pulled up the carpet, there was lino underneath. We pulled that up and we found all these newspapers from 1952. and they were in pristine condition because they had been basically been airlocked under the floor, on top of these floorboards, under the floorboards. So on top of the floorboards, under the carpet. And so they're talking double page spread. And it was 1952, and it was the newspaper from November, which here in Melbourne is when they run the Melbourne Cup. It's the first Tuesday in November. And in 1952, Delray won the cup. And it was this double page spread of the finish line with Delray running a photo, running across to win the Melbourne Cup. And then on other pages, it had fashions on the field from 1952, and it had car ads, these old, now vintage cars, or was it veteran or vintage, whichever one it is, pictures of these, which would have been new in the day. Back in 1952, they were new. They were new off the car lot. It was like this time capsule. It was amazing. And as we pulled up for the flooring going back toward the back of the house, then we had newspapers from 1967, and then in the area that was next to what you'd call a kitchen, there were papers from the 1980s. And I remember seeing there was things about the TV show Neighbours and Charlene, which is Kylie Minogue, and pictures of all of that from, I think it was 1984. So you just find the most amazing things in houses when you're renovating. So we pulled all those up. All the floors had to end up coming up because they were not in great condition. And I remember, so along the wall, which would have been the boundary wall, the studs had all been eaten away by termites. So all of the studs had to get replaced as well. So they're the supporting beams along the hallway. And what's funny about it is, so a stud is, however, it's about, be about this wide. This bit was there, but they had got in, the termites had got in and they'd eaten at the centre, so you could flick it and it was like paper. This is what was holding up the roof. These bits, the studs, the timbers were, and I remember flicking them and they were like paper because they were that fragile to hold up the roof. So we ended up incorporating that back lean-to into the property. That became an inside bathroom, and we did install an inside toilet. We kept the outside toilet, so it's now a two toilet property, and just renovated the whole thing, and it did come up absolutely beautifully. But you just never know what you're going to find in a house when you're doing a renovation. So that's really, really interesting. So if that's something that you're looking to do, buy a property and perhaps something that's a little bit run down, because it's what I call, when I talk to clients, I refer to it as buying wholesale versus retail. And what I mean by that is, if you buy a property in which you can add some value, improve it, etc., you're buying it at wholesale because you can add the value, and then when the time comes to looking to sell the property, perhaps refinance and pull some equity out of your property, that's then the retail that you're able to move on. So buying an apartment or a townhouse, you're buying the retail product because someone else has gone in there and bought the wholesale product and done the manufacture of the growth, created something else, another product, and then is on selling that retail product. So if that's what you'd like to do, if you'd like to purchase a property or you need a hand, then please get in touch with us at Chamberlain Property Advocates. It's what we do. I've been buying and selling real estate for almost 30 years, and I love real estate. I have a real eye for homes. I can rejig floor plans really quite skillfully, and I remember floor plans, and it is something I love to do. We work with you for as long as it takes to find you and buy you the perfect property. So let's get things sorted for you. Let's help you buy the perfect home. chamberlainadvocates.com.au is how to get in touch with us, or you can just drop a question or a comment here on our social media. on your favourite channel in which you're watching your Property Mama episode, and we would love to get in touch. Also, if you do have any questions that you would love me to answer for you, or any particular topics that you'd like me to cover, I would be happy to help. And really, thank you for joining me on today's Property Mama, and I look forward to seeing you again on a future episode. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.